Morena, welcome along to this meeting of the committee to hear submissions and deliberate on the Invercargill City Council's local alcohol policy. Welcome to those that are joining us on the live stream and those who are in the waiting room on Microsoft Teams. I'm Darren Ludlow and I'll be chairing this process along with Councillor Ria Bond and Councillor Andrea De Vries. We'll just confirm the timetable. Somebody want to move that that's approved? Councillor Bond, Councillor De Vries, put that all in favour.
Aye. Against?
Carried. No apologies. Declarations of interest. I have one. We have a written submission from Healthy Families Invercargill. I'm on the leadership group for that, but their submission is an operational matter, and as governance, we've had no input into it. Any declarations, Andrea?
Yep, similar to you. I am a board member at Active Southland who...
They have the Healthy Families contract, but they haven't had direct input. You haven't had any conversations with them?
I haven't had any direct input in this.
Cool, thank you. Right, let's move into the submissions. Our first is from Super Liquor, and hopefully we have Mr. Hoare online, if we can admit him. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning, sir. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for giving up some time to come along and speak to your submission. It's kind of 10 minutes-ish, but we're not inundated, so we're pretty easy. We'll give you a chance. We've all had an opportunity to read through your submission, but it's really over to you now to highlight the points that you'd like to add some extra light on.
Thank you very much. And firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. I won't take long. I've just got a few points to make and welcome any questions that the council may have. So firstly, my name's Greg Hoare. I'm the National Operations Manager for Super Liquor Holdings. And we've got three stores within your LAP area. They are the Super Liquor Southland and Super Liquor Collingwood, which are both owned and operated by the Invercargill Licensing Trust. And just on the outskirts of the city, we have Super Liquor Lawnville, which is privately owned. We really, as a business, are very supportive of LAPs. All we really seek from LAPs, and we do a lot of submissions nationally, is a level playing field, which I'll get to in a minute. So the points I'd like to make, the first one's around the maximum trading hours. We'd prefer, as a business, to keep the hours as they are. However, we're also open to reduced hours. The key thing there, though, for us is we would want a level playing field, meaning that if it's right for one lot of off-premise, then it's right for the other. And the big one that stands out here that is remote sellers. And the way the Act is written is that remote sellers can sell alcohol up to the default hours nationally to 11 p.m. And so we think that if there's reduced hours, and let's just say the council decides for the LAP to reduce to 10, it means that there is another hour there that the remote sellers can sell. And we think what that does is creates an unlevel playing field, but more importantly, it will change people's behaviour, that if the LAP is to reduce alcohol harm, then there's an opportunity there for people to still access alcohol. And the reason I've focused on the remote sellers is that as a business, we have a lot of compliance that we must adhere to. For example, inspections from the Liquor Licence Inspector or Medical Officer of Health or New Zealand Police, and we don't believe that remote sellers have that same compliance. They can effectively work from their homes where they don't see those agencies. We have seen a lot of a big boom in remote licences being issued nationally. And I think, keeping in line with the alcohol policy, I think there is one opportunity that the council could look at, is that they still, under the Act, can sell alcohol until 11 p.m, the default hours, but the opportunity for the council could be that deliveries are only made within the hours that the other bottle stores operate within. So effectively, sell to 11 p.m, but you only can deliver that alcohol the next day until the same time as that the bottle stores are open. So that's just something to leave with you. As far as the sensitive sites with the Marais, we support that. We think if it provides clarity in applications. The freeze on off licences in certain geographical areas, it's something that under the law, I suppose, LAP has to be reviewed every 6 years, and a lot can happen. I reside in Christchurch, and a lot can happen in that time, like we've experienced with the earthquake. So you never know what's around the corner. You don't know with natural events or residential zoning and changes that takes place. So we think the best people that can decide on where license to go is the DLC and potentially ALA. So we don't think a freeze needs to be added into the LAP. And probably the last thing I just want to touch on is the discretionary conditions. It's something that, as a business, we're very supportive of LAPs, but what we'd rather see is that any concern or anything that you'd like to add to the LAP is put into the LAP, rather than having discretionary conditions that could be potentially applied in a different way by one inspector to another, or one licence to another licence. And the main one there, I suppose, is around single sales conditions, in the sense of, how would they be applied? So that's just something that I think what will happen is that if, for example, a condition was put on one licence, all it's really going to do is change buying behaviour. So they'll leave one store to go to another store potentially. The other two things that you have in your discretionary conditions around external signage, we support that. We basically have a no supplier signage policy, so we have clean sites, which we think is good, and we definitely support the council on the buy now, pay later schemes. That's something that we have a policy within our business that our franchisees can't operate that. The only thing I would say, though, is you need to be careful of the definition, because we do have things like trade accounts that for some of our stores may supply restaurants, so it is effectively a buy now, pay later, or a credit card. So as long as that's covered off, the intention of the LAP, I imagine, is about the formal pay later schemes, and we're definitely against those. That's pretty much what I had. As I said, I think the LAP is good. We're supportive. It's just those few things we'd love to council to take into consideration.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate that. We'll just hand over to questions now. I'll kick off if you don't mind.
Sure.
Starting with the remote sales, the delivery agents, are you aware of any other LAPs around the country where the reduced hours suggestion that you made is an operation? So let's say that the off licences are not allowed to trade past 10 o'clock, but if somebody orders from Delivereasy after 10, they have to wait till the next day. Is that operating anywhere else?
Unfortunately not. So I spoke to the principal in liquor licensing in Auckland, which is obviously the largest city, after the LAP, and I think the intention was there that there was no alcohol to be delivered at all after their 9 p.m. closing, but it wasn't included in the LAP. So to answer your question, no.
And what about any others that have ruled on the buy now, pay later schemes, the formal one,
yes,
franchises like Afterpay and...
So with us, we advise our franchisees not. There are other franchisees that do that, but not at Superliquor.
You mentioned...
And it is included, sorry, Sue, it is included in other LAPs through the country, but the definition has been not so much tightened, just clarifying the things like it doesn't apply to credit cards or
trading accounts.
Thank you, sir, yes.
Yep. Great, thanks for that. That's really helpful. You mentioned that 2 of your franchisees in our area are within the Invercargill Licensing Trust.
That's correct.
Have you had any consultation with them before making the submission?
Yes, I have. So we've spoken to Terry Laidlaw, the purchasing officer there, who our direct relationship with, and ran it through also with our Lawnville privately owned one as well, just to ensure that, I suppose our stance is consistent with their thinking as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? None? Great, thank you. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate your time this morning, and thanks again to Super Liquor for your submission.
Yeah, I appreciate your time as well. Thank you very much for your help, time.
Our second submission this morning is from Te Whata Ora. If you please come up, have a seat. It's not the Graham Norton big red chair, so it's quite safe. Dr. Bouchard, is it?
Yes, Dr. Bouchard.
Tom Scott.
Welcome along. We've had a chance to read through your submission, but really the next period of time is over you to highlight the areas of significance that you'd like us to be aware of.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Michael Bouchard toku ingoa no Ōtipoti ahau. I'm a medical officer of health. I'm a medical doctor specialised in public health medicine, employed by the National Public Health Service, Southern Te Whatu Ora Health New Zealand, and as a medical officer of health for the Southern region. I hold the alcohol portfolio and work in the regulatory space as well as the health promotion space. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to our submission, and can I check, is it 10 minutes? Is that the time frame?
We have no problem if you want to go a little longer.
So I will start with highlighting some of the harm of alcohol. The reason I want to do that is because there's an element or concept of proportionality in the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act. So the regulatory enforcement and the regulations themselves should be proportionate to that harm. So I want to draw attention to the fact that alcohol does cause more harm in New Zealand than any other drug. Each year, 900 deaths, 42% of those are cancer. It's worth noting that most New Zealanders probably are unaware that alcohol is a carcinogen. 33% of those deaths are injuries. Every year, around 1,250 cancer diagnoses. 37% of those are breast cancer, 33% are colorectal cancer. 30,000 hospitalisations each year. The cost of alcohol to New Zealand's economy is 9.1 billion. That was a recent estimate, and it's thought to be an underestimate as well. 4.8 billion of that is due to fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So that highlights the fact that most of the harm is actually harm to others, other than the drinker of the alcohol. So fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is one of those areas, but also traffic accidents and family violence are the other two contributors to that fact. We also know that alcohol causes a heavy mental health burden, and you'll see in my submission more detail of all of the health impacts, including that. It's worth noting that alcohol is a risk factor for mental illness and for suicide. And immediately prior to a quarter of the suicides in New Zealand, alcohol was involved. Alcohol is also an equity issue. Unfortunately, Māori are twice as likely to die from alcohol-related causes compared to non-Māori. And also people in the most deprived areas of New Zealand are more exposed to alcohol in the form of off-licences, and they're at greater risk of harm from alcohol. We have some statistics, some local statistics, which I'm not sure are actually in our submission, but I'll cover them later. So they are national statistics. What do we have for Southland and Invercargill specifically? There is data in that space as well. The New Zealand Health Survey shows that can go down to the level of Southland. It's not reported at the level of city or territorial authority, but for Southland, they have higher hazardous drinking rates than the New Zealand average, and currently the highest weekly episodic drinking compared to other regions in New Zealand. If we focus on Invercargill specifically now, There has been work at the national level to break down hospitalisations attributable to alcohol for each territorial authority. So every year, around 380 hospitalisations due to alcohol in Invercargill. Most of those are injuries, or not most, the highest contributor, single contributor is injuries, around about 100. You'll see that in our submission. Then ED presentations, so they're separate to admissions. These are people who present to ED. There are around 700 ED presentations a year to Southland Hospital. A quarter of those are in our youngest age group, 15 to 24 years. And just breaking down that point that I made of the deprivation and the higher impact on those that live in the most deprived areas, of those ED presentations, 71% of those to Southland Hospital are from our highest deprivation deciles, deprivation 7 to 10. So to summarise that first part, the health burden of alcohol harm is substantial. It's not widely known how great that burden is, but I think that awareness is increasing, and I welcome that. There is evidence from the New Zealand Health Survey that indicates the burden for this region, at least, is greater than the average for New Zealand. Now, LAPs, they should be reasonable, and part of that is proportionate, and part of that is proportionate to what? To the harm. LAPs, they are a vehicle of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act to achieve the purpose and object of the Act. I'll speak to that a bit more later, but the main part of that object of the Act is to minimise alcohol harm. So my argument is that given the harm in Invercargill is likely greater than average for New Zealand, and that's evidenced by the New Zealand Health Survey, then I think it's to be proportionate, the LAP and the policies within that and the regulations should be, at the very least, akin to the rest of the recent LAPs, but I think they should actually go further because the harm here is likely to be greater. So that's the proportionality that I'm hoping that the LAP can achieve. So I actually see this as an opportunity. I'm trying to be positive in the face of that harm because local government does have levers. There are central government levers too, but local government has levers. The Act is actually, I believe, your friend. What determines what the Act can achieve, I believe, is mostly the intent of council. If you do intend to minimise the alcohol harm to the greatest extent that you can, you'll find that in statute law, specifically, I'll just point you to two areas, 77F, which is discretionary conditions within the LAP, but also section 117. There's a lot of case law on section 117, which enables any discretionary condition to be put on any licence as long as it's reasonable and not contrary to any other statute in the Act. And recent case law has said that that should not be read down, so it should not be diminished, it should be read at face value. There are only those two things that need to be taken into account, reasonableness and whether it's consistent with the rest of the Act. Which made me think in the previous submitter, that idea about time of delivery of remote cellars. I hadn't thought of that idea before. I suspect that would be worth exploring under 117. There may be an avenue there. And reasonableness, final point on this aspect, it's reasonable in light of the object of the Act. So it's actually not about being reasonable and balancing commercial interests. There's nothing in the Act about commercial interests, and you're not required to consider commercial interests. In fact, in the Supreme Court ruling in relation to the Auckland LAP, which is the only Supreme Court decision relating to the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, so it's rare for things to go to the Supreme Court, they stated that, and I should actually quote just to get it right. It is inherent in licensing regime and expected, given the object of the Act, that controls may have an adverse economic impact on licenses. So if you want to, the point is, the decision is yours. If you want to, you have solid legal ground to make policies that may have an economic impact on particular sellers of alcohol, because there's no right to sell alcohol. It's only determined by granting of licenses. So broadly, what policies work? Well, there is a lot of evidence, international and national, and the World Health Organization has 5 best buys of policy areas. Many people are aware of these. So they're increasing price, decreasing availability, banning or restricting advertising and marketing. And the other 2 are less related to LAPs, but they're specific drink driving, promotional activities, and mental health services or addiction services. So LAPs, they do tend to focus on availability, but can also have policies in other areas that cover price and advertising and marketing. And you'll note in our submission that we do have some policies that would fall under those 2 areas. So coming back to intent, the reason why we are here is because our intent is to minimise alcohol harm. I'm particularly interested in minimising children's exposure to alcohol. There is solid evidence that there's a causal relationship between children's exposure to alcohol and the onset of drinking age and the amount drunk in later life. So the intent for an LAP and for these discussions, it shouldn't be about trying to preserve or maintain a culture that actually harms our health. We have the opportunity to use this in LAPs to minimise alcohol harm, and that is the object of the Act. I think it's also worth noting, as you did at the start of the meeting, noting conflicts of interest. I don't have any, but I think it needs to be noted that, of course, industry does have a conflict of interest. I know it's so obvious, but it is worth stating that. And there's actually, unfortunately, in New Zealand, and it's very similar to other countries, 46% of the alcohol consumed in New Zealand is consumed in heavy drinking episodes. So straight off the bat, 46% would be classed as hazardous drinking. That's not to mention the other 54%, which is still going to cause some harm, no doubt about that. So to some extent, and quite a major extent, the industry is dependent upon hazardous drinking for its current revenue. It's an uncomfortable truth, but it is a fact. So I'm not surprised, and that's based on the 46% consumed as heavy drinking. So if we could wave a magic wand and eliminate all heavy drinking in New Zealand, straight away we'd have to reduce sales by half. And so the industry is not going to be looking to reduce sales by half. yet that's what we need to do to prevent hazardous drinking. So I'll finish off by focusing on some of the specifics in the draft LAP, and I was pleased to see some amendments suggested. So I'll go through what we think is still possible, and I am pragmatic. I realise that you'll not be wanting to be in a situation where you have to have another special consultation process, but I think there is more that you could do and still avoid that possibility. I also want to make the point that there is actually widespread public support for further regulation in the alcohol space. Now, ideally, we would have Invercargill City survey data on that, but that does not exist. And I'd encourage councils to do that. I mean, submissions are obviously biased, and they're not telling us what the whole community thinks. Fortunately, there is an independently produced national level survey, which does show that there's widespread support, public support. So I don't think, if you are concerned about what does our community think, I think that you can look to that survey, which was commissioned by the Health Coalition Aotearoa and the Cancer Society, and it was performed by Talbot. It's done in the same way basically as a election survey, a poll. So some of the highlights of that: 71% of people agree that alcohol industry should not be involved in developing government policies, local or national, concerning alcohol. 80% agree that alcohol advertising should not be allowed in any ways that reach children. 76% agree that neighbourhoods should have limits on the number of places that can sell alcohol. You can look the survey up, there are other results as well, some of them less applicable directly to LAPs. So on the ICC LAP as it stands currently, we support the recommendation 5A of prohibiting buy now, pay later. We don't think that mechanism is appropriate for an addictive substance. We support the recommendation 5B of no granting of special licences on school grounds or events focused on children and young people. I mean, as Medical Officer of Health, I would be opposing those as they come through. But what an LAP can do is it can actually give the DLC some defence or protection. It can enable them to do what they might actually be thinking, but are worried there might not be some grounds to do it. It is true that the DLC could refuse all of those licences as it is, but I support LAPs providing them that security. So we recommend off-licence hours of 9 AM to 9 PM. I note the 10 PM currently. Now, one of the grounds that we're making this is that it's more or less standard now when urban centres are reviewing their LAPs or creating them, that they're all going for 9 PM. So I think that you can be reassured that you would be in line with, I'm not aware of any other urban centre that's had an LAP recently that has not done 9 PM. I'm aware of one that's gone for 8 PM. You can see in paragraph 27 of our submission, it lists many LAPs that have done just that. So we're looking at Auckland, Christchurch, Gisborne, Hastings, Hauraki, Hurunui, Mackenzie, Timaru, Matamata, Paiko, Porirua, Rotorua Lakes, Thames, Coromandel, and
Doctor,
Whanganui.
you've listed them all in your submission. I'm just aware that while I said we were being lenient,
Yes, thank
it
you.
wasn't to an additional 100%.
Yes. It's also interesting to note that it was a recommendation, the 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. by the Ministry of Justice in advice to the Minister, and it's recently been released for the purposes of informing Cabinet and policy decisions. Sensitive sites, you'll note that we include healthcare facilities and Whale Pacifica, and we actually think that should be a prohibition rather than a request to consult. I'm not actually sure what consulting when you're within that 100 metres would achieve, but perhaps, and I haven't heard an argument or case for why that's going to reduce alcohol harm, but perhaps there is a rationale, I'm just not aware of it. I note that the LAP is advocating for a 50% reduction in external signage for off-licences. We're advocating for a total reduction. I'm not sure how many would actually have more than 50% currently. That doesn't protect children from advertising and marketing. We've already got that measure in another LAP, and we've had it volunteered by Superliquor in Hawea, so it's not outside the realms of possibility. And I also do advocate for a freeze of off-licences in high deprivation areas. I actually advocate for a freeze across the board in small urban centres, and that's just based on the amount of harm that alcohol causes. I'm very happy to answer questions, and thank you for the lenience of time.
Thank you, Doctor. In your spoken submission this morning, you were talking about industry of having a conflict of interest. Would it be a conflict of interest or an interest? Bearing in mind it is their business, and I understand the point that you're making, but I'm just trying to get to why it's a conflict.
Well, I think it would be a conflict if every licence holder also has to achieve the object of the Act, which is to minimise alcohol harm. So let's call it a tension then, because they are also trying to maximise sales within the law. But the fact of the matter is, the research shows that 46% of that is not under the law because it's hazardous drinking.
Understand that, and I think the opportunity by way of comment was lost when the Act was reviewed as to what was recommended and what was adopted by government at the time. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor De Vries.
Thank you for coming in and submitting on this kaupapa today. I'm just trying to contextualise some of the data that you've included into your submission, and you did kind of speak to this during your verbal submission today, but you've noted that there were 377 hospitalisations attributable to alcohol in Invercargill, and the data indicates that this is only people that live in Invercargill. It excludes anyone that lives outside of Invercargill. So that number's about 1% of the national, 1.2% of the national hospitalisations. So given that your evidence also indicates that our region has quite a hazardous drinking culture, the hospitalisations are generally probably, I guess, on average, an average number. Like they're not specifically higher than average or lower than average. Would that be right?
That would be right. I wouldn't expect you to see much in that space. It's the way that they work out those attributable fractions. It's somewhat complicated, but they do take into account the drinking levels. They take into account the age structure of the population. So I wouldn't expect to see large variations across the country for those sorts of conditions. I think you have to bear in mind other data sources as well to build up the picture. Unfortunately, we don't have a complete picture of the alcohol harm for any region. We just have small snapshots. So we've got the snapshot of the attributable hospitalisations. for those centres that have an ED, we have, and a reasonably large ED, we have a snapshot of admissions where that relies on a manual flag or tick of yes, this presentation was related to alcohol. And then we've got the Health New Zealand survey data. There aren't too many sources that we have, and that's only a small picture. So we don't, for example, know rates of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder by territorial authority. In there we don't have crime statistics, we don't have family violence statistics. So I'm basing my position there primarily on the Health New Zealand survey data of hazardous drinking. From that, I think it's reasonable to say that it's likely that the Southland region has higher hazardous drinking. I mean, that's what the survey has found recently.
Thanks. I think it's also worth noting that this is our third lap. During the process for our first, the presentations figure was Otago Southland wide, which wasn't useful to us, bearing in mind that takes into account Dunedin and Queenstown, but having those local presentations along with the national survey has been really useful, so thank you for that. Councillor Bond, any questions?
I've just got one small one really. Under your submission, and thank you for this and the data, it's really interesting, stats that are inside of that, but on your point 31, the buy now, pay later schemes, I just need a clarification if you could. You've got here you recommend the prohibition of use of credit afterpay services to procure alcohol from off licences under the section specific to that. Are you aware of anyone being able to use like purchase gift cards in any of the premises that are off licence or bottle stores?
I'm not aware, sorry, I don't know either way whether that's currently practice. Look, if we were aware of that, I mean, our main concern is people putting themselves into debt, and buy now, pay later has less oversight than does, say, a credit card. So I could see the same issues with Prezi cards. I guess they're not, I'm assuming that the money's already on there, so they're not putting themselves into debt. But I'm not actually sure.
Thanks for that. No further questions? If not, thank you for not only your submission, but also to you and your team for giving up time to come along and present to us in person. We appreciate that.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
So as our next submitter is Naomi Lindsay from Hospitality New Zealand, so that's submission 13. Yep. Paraina, Naomi.
Hi there, kia ora.
Thanks for your patience and waiting. Thank you for your submission. Councillors have had a chance to read through it, and it's really over to you now to highlight the points on behalf of Hospitality New Zealand, the Southland branch, that you'd like to make to us.
That's great. Thanks for your time and thanks for letting me do this remotely. I'm in Te now today, so a little bit away from my home. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. As I say, my name is Naomi Lindsay. I'm the Regional Manager for HNZ for Otago Southland. HNZ represents around 2,500 hospitality and accommodation businesses across the country. We have been part of New Zealand's social and economic fabric for over 120 years now, and part of our remit is obviously committed to supporting safe, vibrant, well-run hospitality environments in every community, including here in Invercargill. We welcome the chance to engage on the review of the Invercargill local alcohol policy, and as per our previous pre-review submission, we do support the development of a standalone LAP for Invercargill City, and separating this from the Southland LAP, which we also submitted on earlier this year in January. HNZ recognises Council's desire to minimise alcohol-related harm, and we also share that goal, but we also believe it's important to ensure that policy settings on a local level continue to support a thriving, safe and well-managed hospitality environment. The hospitality economy contributes massively to all of our communities, And when communities thrive, our economy thrives as well. H&Z's, we have submitted across a number of LOPs across New Zealand, and we believe that councils have many alternative options available to address alcohol harm, while also maintaining the community and economic benefit of hospitality. I'll get to the specifics around the Invercargill LOP in a minute, but some of these tools that councils have at the disposal are obviously the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, district licensing committees and their discretion around approving licences, and the ability to issue infringement notices and licence suspensions for non-compliance. And we believe that the DLCs obviously play a huge part on a local level there. Across the country, there are accords and stakeholder agreements in place to drive inner city safety, i.e. the Paniki Promise in Wellington, the Cromwell Alcohol Accord, the Octagon Alcohol of Dunedin, and others that are looking to get underway, for example, in Queenstown, which we're working on. There's also things around host responsibility and sexual harm prevention, i.e. the responsible service of alcohol, the RSAS, Servewise, and Don't Guess the Yes, which is the Respect Ed campaign. In terms of today, our comments focus on some of the practical recommendations we believe will help strike the balance. So regards to trading hours for on-licence, we support the recommendation to retain the current status quo for on-licence trading hours on the basis that we believe that well-run licensed venues play a key role in supporting safe and responsible alcohol consumption. For the above reasons, in terms of we obviously work with a lot of our venues on host responsibility training, and that well-run licensed venues play a key role in supporting safe and responsible alcohol consumption. Reducing trading hours for these venues risks pushing consumption of alcohol to unlicensed or unsupervised environments, i.e. at home, which could result in greater risk of alcohol-related harm. In addition, and I don't think this may have been in our written submission, but we do not support the reduction of off-license trading hours, and the reason being, again, that they decide to buy alcohol is not something that should be governed and ruled on a local level. There's many reasons why somebody might buy alcohol at 9 a.m. or 10 p.m, and that's not necessarily due to alcohol harm. It's just that fits in with their shift pattern or their work pattern. Discretionary conditions. We acknowledge the role that discretionary conditions can play in achieving the purpose of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act 2012, particularly in managing higher risk situations and addressing premise-specific issues. But we also refer to our note and commentary that there are already a number of tools available to reduce alcohol harm, i.e. through the DLC and the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, and that a continued addition to discretionary conditions listed by the LAP is not necessary, and that any issues can be addressed on a case-by-case basis. The District Licensing Committee already has the authority to introduce such conditions on a case-by-case basis, and therefore is the most appropriate vehicle to include such restrictions rather than adding them in. Sensitive sites. We appreciate the clarification of the sensitive sites premises to include marae, healthcare facility, rehabilitation, treatment centres, basically to avoid any misconception between businesses and council, and that's helpful. We support the proposal that clarifies that the requirement to consult does not apply to new applications where this is made solely because of a change of ownership, provided, of course, the licence type and scope of the new licence are the same as the existing licence for the premises. It is important new rules enable existing licence holders to retain the value in their premise and be able to change ownership moving forward. We do oppose the extension of the boundary for sensitive premises from 50 metres to 100 metres. While we appreciate this provision does not explicitly prevent a licence from being renewed, it introduces potentially additional procedural hurdles and uncertainty for operators whose businesses were established prior to the sensitive site commencing operations. And we do not believe that there is evidence that the widening the area to 100 metres would meaningfully contribute to reducing the risk from alcohol-related harm, and is therefore an unnecessary change. I would add to that again that the DLC obviously can review licence applications, and they have that authority to do so within that space. There was, I think, a mention in there about an alternative consideration. We would strongly oppose the alternative consideration mentioned in the consultation document to place a ban on any new licence being issued within 100 metres of the boundary of a sensitive premise. Policy review timing. This has been consistent with our submissions across the country that LAP processes are very timely and lengthy for council, for us, for operators, for everybody involved, and do not support the LAP review being forward slightly. We do not support LAP process reviews are timely and costly, and making them more frequent just adds additional workload for everybody. In summary, Hospitality New Zealand appreciates the chance to contribute constructively to ensure a balanced policy that supports both community wellbeing and the viability of our hospitality sector. We submit the following key recommendations to reiterate. We retain the status quo for on-premise trading hours. We retain the status quo for off-licence trading hours. We allow the District Licensing Committee in their role to issue discretionary conditions on a case-by-case basis rather than continuing to use the LAP as a vehicle to add in conditions. We support existing licensed premises to be unaffected by new sensitive site provisions. We recommend not extending the boundary for sensitive sites and again leaving decisions to the DLC. And we recommend not changing the existing policy review timing to make full use of the tools already available under the Act and through the DLC. Hospitality New Zealand is committed to working with Council and the community to reduce harm while ensuring Invercargill remains a welcoming, vibrant place to live, work and visit. And we hope our recommendations aim to support that balance. Thank you for your time and happy for any questions if there's time.
Thanks very much for your submission. I'll go in reverse and just seek to clarify if you understand that the change in timing is a one-off.
Yes.
In that it won't be every 5 years, but the one-off brings it into a time period where an existing DLC, as opposed to a new one that comes in a new triennium, is making decisions around a LAP with, I guess, a period of time experience behind them, and seeking to clarify if you understand that rationale.
Yes, I think we did discuss this at a high level, and yes, we did. We're just trying to make sure that, again, it's not consistently brought forward to then 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, because the process is obviously quite lengthy. And the discussion we had was that there's already national laws and the DLC powers in place to kind of make these decisions. So the LAPs are important, but revisiting them every sort of 5 years is possibly not necessary. But I appreciate what you're saying and can take that back. I suppose the concern was that if it moves from 6 to 5, then it could be to 4 to 3 to 2 to annual, which I think is possibly a bit onerous on everybody.
I can assure you we don't want to get to that, but as a matter of interest, our first lap was only for a period of 3 years.
Okay.
As we sought to understand, that was the first one we brought in, we sought to understand, and amongst the 3 TAs that were part of it, that we had performed adequately.
And you have learnings, of course, and that's obviously with the separation from IIC and SSDC, that's obviously a learning and a good outcome from reviewing it, so within 3 years.
If I can come to your point around the suggested reduction of off-licence hours to 10 p.m, and clarify your point is around convenience for the customer versus perhaps the customers being organised, because I'm of a vintage that remembers when we couldn't even buy it on a Sunday.
Yeah,
yet
absolutely.
we were prepared.
Yeah, people aren't. And that comes down to, I suppose, there's a couple of things. Is there a reason why we need to legislate on a local level the time that somebody buys alcohol? If that, say, for example, if you're a nurse, you're a doctor, you're a hospitality worker, and you finish work at 10 o'clock, or you're a cleaner, whatever your role might be, you've been working out in farming, whatever it is, and that's your time to buy alcohol. The reason why I think people are looking to reduce the hours is obviously around alcohol harm and intoxication. Off-licensed premises cannot serve intoxicated people. So if they're buying it at 2 in the afternoon, they can be intoxicated just as much as they could be at 11 o'clock at night. So the rules and the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act are clear. They cannot serve people that are intoxicated. So from our perspective, it was around, try not to over legislate when we actually don't know what people's personal circumstances are, like say organised or not organised, that the time of day that they're purchasing it is not necessarily the time of day that they're drinking. It's around that convenience factor. I finish my shift at 10. I'm going to grab a box of beer or a bottle of wine because I've got a day off tomorrow. I'm heading down the coast, whatever the reasons we don't know are. And so there is already legislation in place to protect around that. And for example, that's where the DLC comes in, is if there's repeated offence with, say, for an off licence, they have the power and the tools in that environment rather than adding in further rules and regulations.
Thanks. We are aware of those tools because this committee is also the DLC, as it happens. Thank you for that.
Lucky for me.
Any other questions? Councillor De Vries, anything?
I do have two questions, Naomi. Thank you very much for your submission on this. I am actually one of the new councillors that the chair refers to coming into this, so excuse me if there's any crossover. The accords you refer to in your submission, can you tell me some successful outcomes from those that have been achieved? Just one or two that would, I guess, bypass the need for discretionary conditions? Yeah, so I suppose two things. The discretionary conditions, as I say, the DLC, as you know, can implement them at any time. So what we're trying to say is we keep adding on discretionary conditions every 5-6 years with an LAP. You just get this long list of conditions that the DLCs have to review rather than just looking at a case and going, okay, where's the harm, where's the thing? So that's probably something I'd reiterate. But for example, the Cromwell, and I'm actually 8 weeks into this job as well, so bear with me because I'm learning a lot about some of these accords. But for example, the Cromwell Accord has the, I should have it here next to me. It's called something like once banned, all banned. So for example, if an intoxicated person is removed from a premise in Cromwell, they basically have a group, they have a couple of groups that they basically share the information, say this person is intoxicated and here's a picture and therefore they're not, and this is their name and they're not allowed on the premise. So that then basically means that person is deemed intoxicated by one premise and then cannot get served in any licensed premise in Cromwell. That includes off licenses. So that's something I think particularly, and that happens in Wellington as well. They have different rules in Wellington, but that's the one off the top of my head. I can find more examples, sorry, as I'm just 8 weeks into the role. But that's one of the biggest things that Queenstown is looking to do as well, is have that kind of not one barred, it's called like once out, all out or something. So it just reduces the risk of one premise is deemed somebody quite clearly intoxicated and then passes that message on. And it does work especially well in smaller towns, but I feel like even in Invercargill, it's small enough to be able to, if an accord was something that, and that's all been driven by the premises. That's actually all of the Cromwell stuff has actually been driven by the on and off licensed premises. That's something they wanted to do to protect their community. And the same in Wellington. So that's not something that's been, to my understanding anyway, for definitely Cromwell and Queenstown as well, is something that they want to do to help manage their premises and help their teams. Yeah, I believe that does happen to an extent in Invercargill. And just a second point is, in point 9, you've noticed that you noted that liquor consumption in New Zealand has decreased 30% since 1986. Where's that data from?
Good question. Can I get back to you on that? Sorry, that's, let me just make a note.
Yeah, is it per person or overall?
Overall, I believe, but let me just make a message. I'll get that back to you as soon as I can.
Confident that would be overall.
Yeah, overall. Shall I get that back to you, Kat?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, cool, okay.
Just by way of note, we have had an accord in the Invercargill district once before, but it was under the previous act, so it's a few years ago when a couple of venues were able to remain open until 6 o'clock in the morning. We reached an accord which was promoted by ICC that everybody closed at 3. And by way of note, the amount of inner city harm and damage plummeted as a result. So those things are discretionary tools that that are able to be invoked, as you say, sometimes by licence holders, but also in this instance by council. Councillor Bond, any questions from you?
Not at this time, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thanks, Naomi. Really appreciate your input this morning. Welcome to your new role.
Thank you.
And we'll look forward to hearing from you again at some point over the next while. I'll be quite keen to keep up contact so that we're aware from you from an industry perspective of issues that you think we should be aware of. But thanks for your submission on the lab.
Thanks for listening, guys. I'll get back to you on that stat as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Councillors, our final submitter is Jennifer Lamb from Alcohol Health Watch, who will have been waiting quite patiently. Okay. Let's give it.
So it's our final submitter.
Morning.
Good morning.
The name doesn't match the submitter, but I'm sure you can explain.
That's interesting. Kia ora, ko Andrew Galloway, Taku Ingoa. I'm the Executive Director of Alcohol Health Watch. Do you want me just to crack in?
Please do.
I'm joined by my colleague Jennifer Lamb, who is the person probably named. I'm the Executive Director at Alcohol Health Watch, and Jennifer's one of the team. We're a national organisation. We provide credible, up-to-date evidence and advice regarding alcohol policy and planning matters. We coordinate networks such as the Cross-Council Local Alcohol Policy Network and other networks and projects that support the sector and community. We commend the Invercargill City Council on undertaking a local alcohol policy for Invercargill and conducting early engagement that supported this process. And we thank you for the opportunity to make this submission to you today. Our written submission outlined the reasons why a local alcohol policy should operate as part of a coordinated harm reduction approach. And it's a key measure in a package of measures and policies aimed at minimising alcohol-related harm to individuals, whānau and the community. Other measures can include alcohol bans, the Council's function as a licensing authority, and alcohol-related policies and initiatives. I'm sure this committee doesn't need reminding that alcohol is New Zealand's most harmful drug, with significant health, economic and social costs estimated at over $9.1 billion annually. That disproportionately affect Māori, Pacific and communities experiencing high deprivation. The Council's own research report of August 2025 included relevant data and shows the harm attributable to alcohol in your city. And we know, for example, that there are increasing rates of alcohol-related police incidents in the Southern Police District. The local alcohol policy can reduce this harm by reducing the density, number and location of outlets. It can set maximum trading hours that address the accessibility, sale and consumption of alcohol. It can reflect the current environment and emerging issues in the city and the desirability of ensuring greater consistency and synergy with local alcohol policies across Aotearoa, New Zealand. As determined by the Supreme Court, our local alcohol policy should adopt a precautionary approach to alcohol harm and prioritise the preferences of community over economic interest and align with the object of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act 2012. We noted in our submission an LAP can and should include the full range of policies that are set out in section 77(1) of the Act. We therefore recommend that the LAP could have a policy preventing new licensed premises from being located in close proximity to other licensed premises to address that harm associated with the cluster of premises, and that could be done under section 77(1)(b). We also recommend an LAP should include a policy on issuing of further licences to enable a cap or sinking lid to be applied, particularly in areas where licensed premises have reached saturation levels or are located in high socio-deprivation areas. We're pleased to see that a range of sensitive premises now include marae, but note the increasing number of LAPs have included additional premises, namely education facilities generally, and that would include tertiary institutions. And as proposed in the Southland District draft LAP, health centres, including rehabilitation treatment centres and Whale Pacifica. We also support the increase in the separation distance to 100 metres and the requirement for applicants for a new licence to consult with landlords and tenants of sensitive premises and make neighbouring properties aware as well. Setting trading hours in a local alcohol policy can address community concerns and, as the research very clearly shows, lessen the incidence of alcohol-related harm with extended trading hours. Considering that over 80% of alcohol is purchased from off-licences, often cheaply, we support the reduction in the off-licence closing hour, but recommend that the reduction should be 2 hours, with the closing hour being 9 p.m. and the opening hour reduced from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., as is the case in the draft LAP for Southland. This reflects the current trend for reduced trading hours for off-licences in local alcohol policies across the country. Setting a 9 a.m. opening hour after schools have opened will reduce children's access and, importantly, that exposure to alcohol brand advertising outside off-licences. A 9 p.m. closing time will reduce the risk that people will drink to harmful levels leading to crime and other harms. We also recommend that consideration be given to reducing trading hours for on licences and club licences. We strongly support the inclusion of discretionary conditions that address the management of premises and crime prevention through environmental design principles. We further recommend consideration be given to additional discretionary conditions that reflect community concerns and emerging issues and provide guidance to District Licensing Committee, such as restrictions on single sales, restrictions on buy now, pay later schemes, or afterpay, for example, mandatory age checks on purchase and delivery, restrictions on special licences for events focused on children and young people, restrictions on glass containers at special events, and a requirement to have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder warning signage displayed. Alcohol Health Watch also support a one-way door condition, as these policies have the potential to reduce the high burden on police, ambulance and hospital services at late hours, and can have a really positive benefit not only for the patrons of premises but the community generally. Alcohol harm increases when alcohol is easily accessible, and where a high concentration of alcohol outlets in a particular area, for example areas of high deprivation, or where trading hours are long, where businesses are conducted in such a way that impulsive alcohol purchases are encouraged, such as buy now, pay later, online sales and rapid delivery, and where the price is affordable. Considering this, we at Alcohol Health Watch fully support the strengthened provisions in your draft LAP, and we recommend additional policies that could result in a stronger, more comprehensive policy to reduce alcohol harm in Invercargill communities. Thank you, Mr Chairman and members, for the opportunity to present. We're happy to take any of your questions.
Great, thanks Andrew and Jennifer. Councillors, any questions? Councillor De Vries, Councillor Bond? No, your submission is clear, concise and understood, and we appreciate the time that Alcohol Health Watch has put into not only making it but fronting up and waiting to present your submission this morning. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. Kia ora.
Councillors, that brings us to deliberations. I'm just wondering, do we need a brief recess or are you comfortable carrying on? Excellent. So if we go to page 4, a few procedural recommendations that we need to go through before we get into the deliberations, and I'll take them as one. Recommendations 1, the report is received. We receive the submission. Recommendation 2, recommendation 3, receive the late submission, which obviously we did for Super Liquor. 4, notes the hearing timetables. You moving those, Councillor Bond, seconded Councillor De Vries. Thank you. Discussion? Put that. All in favour? Against? Carried. Into the deliberations on the points that are made, and there are several in there that I think are really worthy of discussion. I know that we've received several submissions around further reduction of off-licence hours. And if the committee was of a mind to consider that, I think the degree of change is such that we would have to actually go back and reconsult on that. The other option could be that you adopt what we've gone out and consulted on, making a note to next time put that out as what we go and consult. A lot of really interesting feedback over an issue that has emerged in the last 12 to 18 months, and that is the buy now, pay later. and that's specifically the afterpay zip, as opposed to the trading accounts and credit cards. And so there is the suggested discretionary condition and definition that the use of buy now, pay later payment services is prohibited for the sale and supply of alcohol. Buy now, pay later means a service where a person is able to receive goods and services immediately, paid for by a third-party provider such as, but not limited to, afterpay or lay-by, and then the person pays back the provider in instalments over a specific period without paying interest. This does not include payments made by credit card or trade accounts, so it's good that the recommendation takes into account those points that were made. Thoughts on that? Councillor Bond.
I do have the submitters that submitted on this were quite clear in what their preference was. And I'm picking up a note from the Superliquor submitter that said some of their premises have a restaurant off to the side. And what I wondered was, even though this definition is really clear, will it prohibit people that are going to go to a restaurant that have a bottle store beside it? My question is, does it prohibit those people from going out for dinner, paying with afterpay or whatever mechanism, and then popping to the bottle store next door? So if they're using their afterpay beside it, would that capture them as well? Alcohol with their dinner and they're afterpaying it.
I'm not aware of people afterpaying their meals. I know that it's a service offered. I don't think the suggested condition and definition makes any difference or distinction between off and on licence. So therefore, if somebody was wanting to afterpay the meal, that's a flat no. It's about any sales of alcohol through that buy now, pay later scheme. Does that help?
It does, yeah. It was just a little grey area when I was listening to a submitter that thought come up, but no, that's good.
The discretionary condition, and this is following on from feedback around special licences not being granted for events held on school grounds or events focused on children and young people, and further definition of the event focused on children and young people is one that is centred around under 18-year-olds, and that it includes but is not limited to children's sports games, school galas, kapahaka and similar. In my mind, that suggestion reflects community attitudes. I haven't seen people drinking sideline on a Saturday morning at sports openly, but there's no licence around that either. That comes down to, I think we've got bans on most of our sports fields anyway, but this is for school events, and sometimes that's seen as inappropriate. So if a school was having a fundraiser that was a champagne breakfast, the idea is that they would not be holding that on the school grounds. You would hold that at an appropriate venue elsewhere.
That's a good point to follow up on, and that was a question that I had, is it okay for a school to do a fundraiser dinner with alcohol if it is off premise?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then the other question is the policy directed at participants that are under 18 years old being exposed to alcohol, or I guess what I'm thinking of is a theatre show where the majority of the actors may be children and it is held in a licensed premise. Are we saying that there is no alcohol available because the show itself has children in it or people under the age of 18?
It would be more focused on the audience. So who are the attendees that are going? So if there's let's use the example of the Wiggles performing downstairs here, at the Civic Theatre, you would not expect the bar to be open. And if it was, it would be quite inappropriate. But particularly given that most of those performances for such shows are during the day. And to a degree that also can affect some matinee performances of shows, so a full theatrical production. Matinees are essentially timed to make those shows available for younger people rather than having a late night. And again, that's the sort of thing that that would be captured. So if it's centred around under 18-year-olds, so is it targeting children? And you know, there's a lot of the rock quests and events like that that I think need to be appropriately captured. Are you comfortable with the suggestion that's in there? I know there was some. Sorry, did you eye that as in you were moving it, Councillor Bond?
Yes, Councillor Liddell.
Breezy, you seconding it?
So that was just
That was B.
B.
Yep.
Yeah, happy to second that based on our discussion.
So put that all in favour. Against. Carried. The others are kind of catch-all, and I think there's a few comments we can make around that. The suggestion of I think I mentioned earlier, of the 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. hours change is a significant step away, but I also, at the same, from what we've consulted on, and I think we could potentially be stepping outside our bounds if we made that at this point. But I'm happy for us to note that it should be included as the baseline for the next consultation.
Was it in the consultation? I think it was in the consultation document as an alternative. So does that cover it, Chair? An alternative is reduce maximum trading hours to 9 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Wandering back. Hannah, that was in there as that, was it? Can you just clarify for me?
Yes, Councillor Rees is correct. It was written down as a specific alternative. So the question was, this is what's proposed and these are the alternatives. Do you have any comments? Okay. Thanks.
So it all depends on where you're of a mind to shift to. The recommendation was bringing it back to 10 p.m. as opposed to the 9 to 9. I dispute the convenience clause. It's the argument that's been put forward by some people. I think people can be organised for the sake of an hour, and I think we also need to recognise some shift, bearing in mind that statistics show that most alcohol-related harm is not happening on premise, but as a result of off-licence sales. So it's whether you want to proceed with 10 p.m. or somebody is of a mind to shift and suggest 9 to 9.
No, my preference would be to move the preferred option of 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.
But noting that next time we could look at offering as the primary option 9 to 9 when the LAP is reviewed next in 5 years. Because I think it would be interesting to see what discussion that provoked, if that's where we went. I mean, that's just a note that we can make to ourselves for the next time we consult. It's an interesting proposition, and I can foresee the responses it would get. But again, I think planning works. So you were of a mind to support what was in as the preferred option in the consultation document, Andrea?
Yeah, the preferred option was just reduce it by an hour from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. I think there's been a lot of discussion and noting through the submissions around reducing that further to 9 p.m, and that should potentially be explored, but I don't think we've had enough discussion about the change of the morning time, which is, it is an interesting time because you're thinking who's going and buying, purchasing alcohol, but that may be part of the preparations for the rest of your day. You are, heading away or doing something for the rest of the day, and you have to buy it first thing before you leave in preparation for something later that day. I don't believe that the majority of people, if they are purchasing at 7 a.m, are purchasing it for the purposes of drinking at 7 a.m. We can explore that next time.
I think there's some recognition as well that there is far more shift work that happens these days as opposed to, say, 20 years ago. I'm kind of ambivalent. Councillor Bond, what's your preference?
I'm of the opinion that we can move with the recommendation of off-licence trading hours from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. comfortably, but then also to note that the next
Thanks. We're going through this by process of consensus. One of the other points that was made was around one-way door policies, a mandatory one-way door policy, which is something that we did explore twice previously with other laps, and there are potential risks that come with that as well. But it also exists as a tool for us to use as a discretionary option, and that has been invoked. In fact, we had a one-way door policy on a special licence late last year, and it was so effective that the next time that licence, there was a similar special licence came through, it wasn't needed because the event had shown that it was able to be managed successfully. But it's a useful tool to have when we're exploring new events. And although one of the things that I love in decision making is consistency, and we do look for that, the use of discretionary policies are a series of useful triggers when we're entering the I'm not sure realm, when we have new applications or events that we might not have considered. For example, the Distilled Festival that was held at Queen's Park recently. And it depends on the operators, track records, experience. I know that in that instance, the applicant had significant experience at running similar events elsewhere, and so there's a degree of confidence, whereas if you've got someone who's trying it as a startup event, you probably want to have more discretionary conditions available to be used until you're sure that things are going to go as they should do, bearing in mind that the purpose of the Act is to minimise harm. I think one of these suggestions that I think it was from Alcohol Health Watch was almost like double stating in the lap some of the things that exist within the Act. I don't see that as useful. It's kind of like underlining things, and I get the intent of the submission, but if it's there, it's there. And a licence holder has to follow the rules of the Act anyway. So with the submissions we've had, which includes the submissions not heard, are you comfortable with the revised local alcohol policy as recommended? So that's with the 10 p.m. closing for off licences. Any other changes that you were wanting to make?
I'm sorry, I'm just scrolling. Oh yeah, no. So I definitely support the definition or the condition around buy now, pay later. I think that actually buy now, pay later schemes cause significant financial harm. So I think that actually, alongside a good alcohol policy, sort of, the means people have to be able to pay for that alcohol.
I think it's worth recognising the extension of the distance for consultation around significant sites and the changes of the definitions of significant sites. We've seen a lot of support for that. It's worth noting that the intent of the LAP is to recognise that existing businesses already have the right to be there, and if an existing business changes ownership, it is still the same business in the same area, so there's no difference, and it's really to capture new businesses. Comfortable with that?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I would also hope that a new business owner that operates within this industry is considering its social licence and being a good neighbour, but maybe doesn't need to be as part of this policy, just a human standard.
It's interesting because when notification goes out, and we've had a couple of examples during the previous term where neighbours had concerns, and the hearings process was, when they objected, was a chance for them to voice their concerns and for the applicant to be aware of them and to open that chain of dialogue, which really should just happen as a matter of course. If somebody comes and does a good job in consulting with you and saying, this is what I'm planning on doing, what are your thoughts? If that's done well, then that lessens the chance of an objection or of the applicant being aware of steps that they could take, which saves it coming to us, but it works.
I think too, by that process and that question of social licence, being a good neighbour, in those instances, the particular operator made some really good recommendations himself to help improve considerations for the neighbours. It was really a good process.
Sometimes it's an opportunity, though, for the neighbours to express concerns that are actually outside the purvey of the licence holder, and traffic going past with loud stereos and people drinking in cars isn't really something that in a residential or business area that a licence holder can control, because it's a public road, but it's a chance for people to express their concerns and certainly make sure that council's aware of what they're feeling. That brings us to the other two recommendations then, recommendations 6 and 7, and I get the sense that you're comfortable proceeding with that, approving the revised LAP and authorising that it be finalised 30 days after the date on which it's notified. So that's a recommendation that goes through to council.
Yeah, I'm happy to move those recommendations. 5.
So 5A, B.
Has already been moved, I believe.
Yes,
yep.
So it's just 6 and 7, thanks.
Yep.
So moved and seconded, I'll put that. All in favour? Against? None. Carried. Okay, I think the process has been really useful in some of the issues that have been raised. I want to take the opportunity to state that even though we're a hearings panel, as a DLC, we are very aware of the statistics around the Southland and Invercargill district specifically. I think legislatively more could have been done when the Act was introduced, but we are aware of the trends, but we're also aware of what we can and can't stop. At some point there are aspects of human behaviour that are beyond our control and cultural. I do anecdotally note that there are some shifts that are going on, particularly with younger people, where it's less of an issue now as opposed to when I'd have fitted that category, which is some time ago, for people when they choose not to drink, that they're not given a hard time, that it's a much more acceptable choice now, but within certain sectors. And it's not just low deprivation areas, because I think in other areas there are attitudes that are also of concern, but we're able to deal with them in some ways on a case-by-case basis as renewals come up. and that's a process that we'll be going through as a DLC soon, I understand. But we've had some really interesting feedback and some great information in the submissions that we've received through this process. It's my third and final lap. I'll call it a victory lap. And I may find myself being a submitter the next time it comes up in 5 years. Just to note that it is, again, I made the comment during the hearing, it is far more convenient to be having a discussion around a local alcohol policy when the decision makers are versed with it, and Councillor De Vries, appreciate you at the deep end a little, but not completely unfamiliar with HOSPO. And that was the reason for that change to a 5-year review. It would go back to 6 years to fit in with the triennial cycle after that. But it is always able to be reviewed. As I said, the first lap was only for 3 years because it was our first, and we weren't sure as a combined lap between us and Southland and Gore districts that we had it right. And you know, if there were social changes going on that were of a concern, we can actually review a policy at any point. Now, I take the point that was made in submission from Hospitality New Zealand that it's an expensive process for them, but you know, it is for us as well. But it's a trigger that if council feels sufficiently concerned, it should pull if it's noticed a change in what public expectations are, or if there are issues that need to be dealt with. And so for those continuing on, note that. Thanks to those once again who've joined us online and in person, we appreciate that. And for all those who've made submissions, I'll declare the hearing closed.